Professor, I don't think we need to start the interview by asking which way you'll be voting come the 18th. I think that's all very clear. We've talked to people in business about their feelings and their fears, if you like, about the 18th if a yes vote comes to fruition. From your point of view, from an academic point of view, what are your main concerns should we have a yes vote on the 18th?
My main concerns are scientific research is an obvious one because we do extremely well at the moment in Scotland out of the UK science research system, which is basically the best in the world in terms of banks for buck. You know, the UK delivers better science for the money it spends than any other country would. We're only second to the US in terms of output, but that's because the US spends a lot more money than we do. And we're losing all that. If Scotland votes for independence, it'll walk away from that. And so we lose the benefits which are financial. We get a lot more money than our sort of population share because we have better scientists in a very competitive system, bidding for money in a UK system, and we do extremely well in that competition. And that's one of the essences of science, is it's very competitive. And if we move away from that, we'll become a much smaller enterprise. We'll only be competing with a tenth the number of people that we're competing against at the moment. And there's no prospect that we'll get that additional funding that at the moment comes from the UK. The Scottish Government in its white paper says it would like to continue that, but I think the prospects of that happening are zero for all practical purposes, because I don't think, for a start, I don't think the English taxpayers would wash it. You know, that they would be paying for a lot of research being done in Scotland in a foreign country over and above the sort of research that they have to fund for themselves. So that's from the bodies called the research councils, which are essentially, they're independent of government, but they're funded by government. And of course they have an obligation to basically do research that at the end of the day suits the national objectives, also medical research, for example, cures for cancer and infections and dementia. All those sort of things are the sort of things that we do very well in Scotland because we're in that UK system. There's also probably a problem with the charities as well, the big charities like the Wellcome Trust, Cancer Research, which are UK bodies. And they've made it pretty clear that things would change if Scotland became independent, that Scotland wouldn't have unlimited access to that money, because most of that money is generated in the UK, it's not generated in Scotland. So there are all sorts of issues about funding, also issues about our influence in that system as well, which is very great, that a lot of us in Scotland are on committees in London deciding where the money goes, and that would go as well. So it wouldn't just be the money, it would be the influence in determining science policy, and that would be a big blow to Scottish universities, particularly the top 5 Scottish universities. I mean, the top 5 are in the top 200 world universities.
Why do you think it is, Professor, then, that Scotland consistently punches above its weight in terms of research and in terms of education?
Yes, we've consistently punched above our weight for, well, ever since the Union, basically. And we've worked the system to our advantage, not just by being very good at doing it, but by having people at the top table. And for example, you know, the system we got at the moment, which really started round about 100 years ago, Scots played an absolutely crucial role in setting it up, because they were down in London and other parts of the UK actually working out the system. It wasn't worked out, they didn't set out to say, let's have a system that favours the Scots. They said, let's have a system that favours science. But at the end of the day, they were key players in that, and they still are key players in that. And of course, there's also all the traffic between Scotland and other parts of the UK in terms of scientists moving about. And the examples I like to quote are Joseph Lister, who invented antiseptic surgery, which was a revolutionary change. I mean, he came from England. He came up to Scotland, made his discoveries in Scotland, then he went back to England to tell the English basically how to do it along Scottish lines, in a sense. And then there was Alexander Fleming, of course, who was born in Scotland, went to school in Kilmarnock, then went to England age 16, and eventually went to medical school at St Mary's Hospital, where he discovered penicillin. And so he was a Scot working in England, and that sort of toing and froing has been an integral part of the British science system ever since the 300 years of union. And I wouldn't want to see anything happen to impede that free flow. People just don't think about coming to Scotland, coming to a foreign country, or going from Scotland to England, going to a foreign country. They just go where the science is and where the good universities are.
And there is a massive appeal for international students to come to Scotland and English students. Do you think that would change under independence?
Well, of course, the big issue at the moment is the student fees issue. Scotland, being devolved, has decided, the Scottish Parliament has decided they won't charge fees for university students, and that's a Scottish policy. You don't have to be independent to do that. We've done that already. But what the Scottish Government would propose is that to stop an influx of English students, because the English students at the moment have to pay. If Scotland joins the EU, that would be against the EU rules, that the English students would get the deal that the Scottish students get at the moment. So the expectation would be that they'd come flooding up here because they wouldn't have to pay any fees. I don't know whether that would happen or not, but at the moment the argument is, we'd have a special argument and so on. We'd still charge the English to come up to Scotland, even though that would be against EU regulations. So that's one big issue that sort of festers away at the moment, and I don't think the Scottish Government's idea that it would go to court and win, it might go to court, but I think it would lose because precedent would not be in favour of it. Yes, Scottish universities are very attractive to overseas students, and Scottish universities, in fact, do extremely well. They do extremely well financially, and they also do extremely well in having these very, very clever people coming from all parts of the world to Scotland, adding a lot to Scottish culture and Scottish work and so on, and then going home. Many of them will go home imbued with the sort of principles that they've picked up here, and we in Scotland are very proud of our general way of life and the sort of principles of democracy and all that kind of stuff. So it's got a very, very big influence in world terms, and has had for more than 100 years. People have been coming to Scotland as far as they used to come from America in the 18th century to do medicine in Edinburgh. Nothing much has changed.
Finally, Professor, for those who are watching this who are genuinely undecided, what words do you have for them in order for them to have the confidence to vote no on the 18th?
My words to them would be, Britain has been a great success over 300 years. We haven't always got it right, but we've been a great success. In many ways, we've been a model to other countries in the world. And I would like that to continue. And Britain has done this through evolution and not through revolution. I think for Scotland to break away, it wouldn't be the Scottish Revolution, but it would be revolutionary in its impact. Things would change so drastically and so dramatically. And yet we don't know exactly what those changes would be because we haven't been given the prospectus for it. I would say be much safer, keep the UK going, and use your influence to change the UK. If you're unhappy about things, and most things, we can all identify things we don't like, you could change that. We have a democratic process. You have political parties that you can affiliate to, that you can support or not support, depending on your views, to make change. And I think we're much better together doing that sort of change. That all the issues that, for example, are put out by the Yes people in terms of having a fairer society, these should be things that we should be having for the whole of the UK, not just for Scotland. It's a very selfish view, I think, just to say, we'll keep the oil and we'll just go on doing our own thing and basically the rest of the UK can lump it. I think that's a very selfish view. I'd like to see all the changes that we're talking about in terms of the debate applying to the whole of the UK and not just to Scotland. So vote no.